On the previous episode we were talking about the theory of nothing that says if you'll overpay for a watch, you'll enjoy it more. Today we're talking about Murphy's Law that says what can go wrong will go wrong. So I will tell you how I ended up destroying the mission to the Mars MoonSwatch in the most stupid way possible. Not to mention that the watch wasn't mine. So, long story short, I have a good friend who was kind enough to give me his mission to the Mars MoonSwatch for review, so I was excited to make a side-by-side video with the mission to the moon. We've met, we've discussed, and when he handed over the watch to me, he said the following thing: please take care of it. And when he said that, in my mind I was like, come on, you already know that by default I'm taking care of it, because this is my job in the end. But in the same time the Murphy Law was activated in my subconscious, thinking always on what happens if something goes wrong. So I kind of felt this pressure, knowing how vulnerable these watches are. So I took it home. I didn't look at the watch while I was with my friend, so I didn't have any current reference of the condition, but he told me that the watch is like brand new. Now, while it was in my possession, I took it once from the box, I looked at it and put it immediately back and closed the box completely in order to avoid any unpleasant accidents, exactly as I promised. Being very careful how I was handling the watch, in fact so carefully that I was like maneuvering plutonium around the table. Now, when I removed it from the box and carefully placed it to shoot it side by side with the mission to the moon, I spotted some strange matted areas on the plastic crystal. And I was like... I wiped those areas and still nothing, and when I looked carefully I noticed that the crystal was severely scratched and matted. Being in a condition where nobody in this world would buy it, in a mint condition, not even pre-owned. So trying to assume what happened, it felt like the owner worried and hit the crystal against something tough, but without damaging the tachymeter bezel because it was in mint condition. So I immediately contacted my friend, the owner, and asked him how was he able to scratch the crystal that bad. And in reply he was like, what? The watch is brand new. I pulled it off from the box once, made a wrist shot and put it back until it arrived in your possession. And in that moment I was entirely confused, because I couldn't find any logical explanation for this. If the watch was in mint condition, then it ended up in my possession where it wasn't worn, I don't have pets, and no one to maneuver it in my absence. How this mission to the Mars got auto-destroyed? How? And then, looking carefully at these scratches, they were positioned on the left and on the right hand side, looking like someone wiped the crystal against something like sandpaper. And then looking at the table, I see the box. No way! And then I remembered a tiny potential detail. As I mentioned before, I only opened the box once. I looked at it and then put it back on the box. In that specific moment, I think it happened. I removed it from the box, I looked at it, then I surrounded the strap around the cardboard stand and pushed it back on the box. When I noticed that it doesn't go straight on the bottom of the box, I didn't insist to push it and I left it a bit suspended, so the watch was sitting on the stand higher than normal. And because I was in a rush, but still wanted to protect the watch, I closed the left and the right flaps of the box and they put pressure on the plastic crystal. So that was the only moment when the cardboard sleeves could have left marks on the left and on the right hand side of the crystal. A piece of hardened paper can ruin the crystal of the MoonSwatch. It's stupid, it's unbelievable. The box that is meant to protect the watch can also destroy it. And as stupid as it sounds, if we look at the surface of those flaps in detail, indeed we can spot a grainy pattern that can act as a softer sandpaper when the pressure is applied. So 100% my bad, sloppy handling, unspecific from my side as a watch reviewer which handled hundreds of watches, new, pre-owned or borrowed. So I texted my friend and told him I know what happened, I explained, I proposed him to try to polish the crystal with polywatch, as I hope that the scratches are superficial. I also offered to pay him the Chrono 24 price of it without any remorse, where the watch is valued around 600 euros on the market. And I did that because I value more our friendship and the mutual respect between ourselves before any watch or any amount of money. So I received a reply to my proposal. He obviously laughed and said, "Man, please have zero worries, it's not the case. But if you can polish the crystal, that would be amazing." So I was like, But I still have a difficult task because the crystal of the mission to the moon wasn't easy to polish. So while I'm polishing this one, I might damage something else. And after all these MoonSwatch experiences, I am taking everything into account now. So remember, if you are planning to put a MoonSwatch back in the box, please make sure that the cardboard stand goes to the bottom and the crystal stays below the level of the cardboard sleeves. Now, unlike the previous attempts to polish the mission to the moon which had deeper scratches, on this one I won't be able to give up, having the mission to push it almost to factory quality and hand it over as I received it. So I trimmed as well as the last time some paper tape until I'm covering accurately the tachymeter bezel, because I'll have to polish the edges as well. But this time I changed a bit the technique. After I applied the Polywatch abrasive paste, I spread it with my bare finger without pressing on the crystal, trying to blunt a bit the edges of the scratches before I buff it with the fiber cloth, because the cloth absorbs very fast the abrasive paste. But for more details, I would like to make a separate video on how to use Polywatch to remove the scratches on a MoonSwatch using a standard kit. So let me know if you find it useful. Also, please subscribe for future updates because it really helps. Thank you. Now, 1 hour later, I succeeded to remove those ugly scratches and take it almost to factory quality. I say almost because if you want to make it perfect, you need the right materials and knowledge to make it even better than factory. Also, to validate the progress, I was looking through the macro lenses at 8x zoom by switching the focus from the dial to the surface of the crystal. So I will call it mission accomplished and hope that my friend will be satisfied as well. And as a lessons learned, guys, I will never want to interfere with MoonSwatches again, because the vulnerability of these watches proved me once again how bad these toys are. If they can be destroyed by the boxes that are meant to protect them, imagine how easy it is to scratch the crystal with a jacket sleeve. Now, on a perfect bipolar positive vibe, and since I was able to clean up the mission to the Mars dial, I was hoping to look at these two hyped models in detail, and for this reason, when it will be available online for retail prices, people will still ask themselves which one to buy. Will it be the Uranus model, the hyped Tiffany color of 2021, the Mars version because of the beautiful white dial, or the mission to the moon because it accurately represents the iconic Omega Speedmaster MoonWatch? So the mission to the Mars is one of the most customized MoonSwatches from the collection because of the unusual rocket hands from 9 and 3 o'clock. So this is indeed an important representation, but not specifically because of the red planet, but because of the Alaska Project Speedmaster, which was firstly developed in 1969. This model was experimentally tailored to be worn on a red outer case that was able to protect the watch from temperature resistance up to 260 degrees Celsius down to minus 140 degrees Celsius. Now, the mission to the Mars, besides the beautiful white dial color, has the 9 and the 3 o'clock hands painted in red, which are in the shape of a rocket. And as well, only 2 out of 3 subdials have the rocket symbol, where the second hand remains basic exactly as the original model from 1969. And loom-wise, the rocket hands have extra loom compared to the mission to the moon version. The hour and the minute hands have the center painted in white, where the tips of the hands are painted in black to make contrast with the white background of the dial. Now, the mission to the Mars is not provided with a similar protective red outer case, but it feels that the red bioceramic case itself pays homage to the Alaska Project through color. Now, transposed into the plastic swatch version, from the materiality perspective, I cannot say that the mission to the Mars looks like a real watch. Even though the bioceramic case doesn't look cheap, I still see it as a souvenir watch, a toy watch that aims to emulate the real one. And I know it's not a toy, it's a new way to advance, to optimize materials, to cut cost, but to still offer substance for the enthusiasts. However, to the late adopters or the purists, the watch feels way too lightweight to be perceived as a watch, and way too sensitive to be worn with confidence, and feels like a dummy case which is empty inside. So the mission to the moon gives the same feeling. From the details perspective, feels very accurate, having the vintage inspired dial with the correct embossed subdials and the angled minute track. The loomed markers also have a slight patina that reminds us of the vintage models. The case is accurate from the proportions and the details perspective, but the bioceramic weight and the texture simply cannot trick our minds. Plastic is plastic, a homage is a homage, a swatch is a swatch, not an Omega. And after this swatch experience, I don't want to hear about MoonSwatches anymore. Call me old-fashioned, call me a snob, but I simply prefer normal watches. So this was my lessons learned episode, and hope that this mistake will help you not to repeat it. And please let me know if you want to see how to polish a MoonSwatch. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing for future episodes. Thank you very much. Thanks for watching, and until next time. Be brave, but keep your MoonSwatches safe.